Ladies and gentlemen, is the speaker working in that direction? Yeah, because you can't tell from this spot. My name is Doug Sobey. I'm the president of the Bedeck Area Historical Society. And on behalf of the board of the society, I want to welcome you all tonight to our second presentation in a series of 6. And I want to particularly welcome our speaker, Dr. Josh McFadyen, and I'll introduce him in a moment more fully. We are having 6 different talks this summer, every Monday evening at 7 p.m. in this particular room. And they have proved successful for a number of years now, and this summer looks like it's going to be the same. And we try to have a variety of speakers. Last week, Dr. Edward MacDonald of UPEI spoke on the Irish immigration into Prince Edward Island over a period of a century. And I think we must have had all the Irish of Kincora here because we had to scramble for seats. Come on in and have a seat. There are seats at the front and at the back. Okay, come on in, Brian, and get a seat. And I hear more coming there as well. I just heard the bell. Tonight's talk is on an entirely different subject, but it is concerned with history, more recent history of the 20th century, and I'll leave Josh to talk about his subject rather than try to cover it myself. So I want to introduce Josh himself. I have known Josh since at least 2010 and the environmental conference at UPEI of that year. He is Associate Professor and Canada Research Chair in Geospatial Humanities in the Faculty of Arts at UPEI. He teaches in the Applied Communication, Leadership and Culture program and leads the GeoReach Lab at UPEI, which supports geospatial research in Atlantic Canadian history. And you will get a sense of what his subject is from his talk, I'm sure. His most recent book he's brought along copies tonight, Time Flies, A History of Prince Edward Island from the Air, which looks at the changing landscape as revealed in aerial photography and other forms of recording. And this won the Prince Edward Island Museum and Heritage Foundation's Publication of the Year Award in 2023. Now, Josh grew up on a beef farm in Hazel Grove, and he now lives in Winslow with his wife Colleen and their 4 children. So, Josh, I welcome you to speak on Village People, an aerial history of the decline and rise of small-town Prince Edward Island.
Transfer. Can you hear me as well as you heard Doug? Okay, good. Thank you very much, Doug, for that very kind introduction, and it's been such a pleasure working with him over the years, and so great that he's spending, I hope, more time on PEI, and certainly all the work he's poured into this. I know with probably a number of volunteers who are in the room over the years, this historical society and museum is well, widely acclaimed in PEI. And you could debate which is the best, but it's among the top here. And I really enjoyed working with Doug and some other folks in the room I see who recognize some of the stuff. I apologize if there's a little bit of duplication for anyone who's seen something before, but I did want to shift some of the content of the book and elicit some of the content of the book that could unpack this issue of PEI's original village people and what's happening to villages on PEI. We'll not profess to prognosticate and predict what is going to happen with villages and small town PEI, but I have a few thoughts after studying this for some time. And I will also confess there's quite a few villages that start to all look the same, a little bit on PEI, but I will, the book of course is on the top left. You can't understand the village culture of PEI without understanding agriculture on PEI and fisheries, but the primary sector is so important for that. This is the village that I hailed from. I think he mentioned Hazel Grove, which is just over the hill, so you all know which village this is, right? Onto River. Any guesses on this one? No, French River. It's the color, isn't it, that makes you think French River, but not. It's pretty close to here. It's Verdalben, probably in the 1960s. Yeah, and you can see over here. I think you all know where that is. Yep. So is that store the one that's attached to the? Is that view the attached building just over here? The Yeso, I guess.
No, we're talking about that building.
You're in front of the.
Yeah, so we're on this side of it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I thought. That was the Esso was the attachment down just yonder, and of course a little bit of PEI scenery. But to take you back and to acknowledge and thank some of my grad students who've been very helpful with this, and don't let me forget Bailey Clark here, who's a resident of Indian River, and helped quite a lot with the preparation of research for the book as a research assistant. But then I brought him on and we published an online companion to the book called Time Flies Online. It's creative, I know, but which it was the easiest to remember, and as things change, it will hold true. So Bailey Clark is local and has helped so much, and so much that I made a co-author of the online companion, and I hope to show you some of that, which is why I got connected to the internet there, Doug. So don't let me forget to show that off a little bit. So speaking of rural scenery, here's my 4 children a little while ago, and here they are on the hills of Clyde. My parents have come out. Thanks very much, Mom and Dad. But for raising me there, that was a great spot. This is the hills of the Clyde Road, just past Hunter River on the west side. And my 4 kids there, they've grown up quite a bit since then. They are now representing about a third of the brass band at Colonel Gray. Because my son also plays trombone. I've lost the photo of him, but he's now in university. So all teenagers, all living at home. Here they are in a spectacular location on the Faroe Islands last year. Yeah, we were lucky to take a trip there. And I was giving a presentation. So. That's my kind of recent roots. My other roots go a little farther back. Here's my grandfather, and as most of you know, now you can find the 1931 census online. Dingwall McFadyen on the left there in Meadowbank, close to Cornwall. And the 1931 census, of course, shows everyone. So of course, everyone on the island in 1931. And Dingwall, who is so named because his mother, Lola Dingwall, hailed from, no surprise, East Kings. At that point he was only 8 years old, so a few years before this photo, and married his sweetheart just down the road, Dolphy, Dingwall and Dolphy, and she was Dolphy McLean, and she was running around, little rugrat, 5 years old, must have been pretty dirty when she came in because the enumerator thought it was a boy. There she is, definitely not, a few years later. So it's great to have these sources and great to have these roots, but I guess one of the reasons why I do it, and I'll show an image that you've seen probably quite a few times, is that I'd like to think that by studying the past, we can be better prepared to handle what comes in the future. So climate change, severe weather, these are just some of the issues that we're facing. And when Fiona hit, that of course was a picture of Fiona. When Fiona hit, right, a lot of us just didn't know what to do, so some of us picked up chainsaws, or there's my son and I chainsawing, and Radio Canada picked it up, and then later that night said, could you talk to someone in Toronto about what you're doing? And I mean, I was not doing anything. I was just they happened to see it on Twitter, and so they followed me into a couple of neighbors' houses, just going up and down streets, and I've got old neighbors here, Vaughn and Noel, who remember all this well, so I was going, And then when I realized who it was, I was, of course, without electricity. I went into my office and had my phone. It was just a black screen, and then they're like, "It's Rosie O'Donnell. You'll be talking." I'm like, "Oh wow!" Like, I kind of didn't. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I could hear like some Ukrainian general talking, and this was of course early in that war. But and I expected that she was being prepped on kind of research related to this. Why would she want to talk to some guy in PEI without power? But it really did become like the local man without power for 8 days. But all that to say, we do face a lot of severe changes and severe climate. So I hope that some of these books on the right, the one that Doug Sobey is featured in Environmental History of Prince Edward Island, and the new one on the left, which at one point I was going to call an Environmental History of Prince Edward Island, but from the air, but it just sounded very similar to the new book. So, and it really is about more than just the environment. It's about our built environment, and it's about society, cultures, and changes, which I hope to kind of dive into with you today. Yeah, so I'm hopeful that these books will help kind of prepare us in some ways. We don't really have maps of the future. Of course, we only have maps of the past. We know where we came from and how we got to here. And the question of agricultural change really is in chapter 1 and 2, so I won't really get into urban development. And I can talk a bit about coastal change. It's a very important part of the book and of PEI's particular situation, but I want to focus on those kind of first 2 chapters. The book kind of goes site by site across about 50 sites on PEI, some of them are like 2 and 1 situations, but these sites all across PEI are kind of place histories. So by looking at maps and air photos, we're able to show one specific place and then track its changes over time. And I will show you, as I show you the website later, I want to feature a website that anyone can use. The website is free, and then the GeoPEI that I would like to show you is another way that you can do this anywhere. So I just had to choose 50 sites because books are kind of rigid that way. Still, they're not quite so interactive, but you can go on to GeoPEI and do kind of what we're going to do here anywhere on the island by looking at historical layers and turning them on and off. And those are made up of some of our favorite kind of historical sources on PEI. So we have our maps, like the 1880 Meacham's Atlas, for instance. We also have the 1928 Cummins Atlas on it. I have the 1765 version of the Samuel Holland map on there. And it's actually the Charles Pettigrew, the reproduction from the 1920s. So it's a very high quality digital scan. But all of these maps can be brought into websites now. And the disadvantage of, the wonderful thing about having paper maps is to kind of realize what went into making them, and it's easier to scale them in some ways to understand what you're looking at. But of course, each one of these little different colors that you see is one of the lots, one of the 67 townships across PEI. And often they're on 1 per page, or one spread across 2 pages, sometimes 2 across 2 pages, but they are difficult when you get to the edge of the page. You don't know where to go. Sometimes it's the next page, and sometimes it's 15 pages later. And then turning layers on and off, of course, is very difficult with the book. So GIS, I see my old collaborator Bill Glenn here, who has taught me a lot about GIS and the way that it's so powerful for taking historical records as well as modern kind of scientific work in GIS, Geographic Information Systems by the GIS, and then helping us compare them over time. So the 1880 Atlas is an example of some of the historical maps, but we also have a lot of air photos on there. PEI is blessed to have kind of tip-to-tip coverage of aerial photography. This is 1968, but we also have 1935, and I'm just about to add the 1958s, which have been done. They didn't turn out in as crisp a quality as I'd like. 1968 is really, really high resolution. For the map nerds in the room, it's like less than 1 meter resolution. So each pixel represents about 90 centimeters of real world space. It's really remarkable that we have that anywhere in Canada, but to have it for the entire province like PEI is very, very, very cool. So you can zoom in and kind of almost see what's in the truck bed in the back of your grandparents' yard. And then, of course, you can compare that with modern layers, and we have 2010 and 2020 on there as well. So we'll dive into that, take a look through some of these. But first, kind of want to go chapter by chapter. Like I said, we have to understand the sort of transitions in agriculture and rural life on PEI before we can really understand the importance and the role of villages. So I'm going to look kind of more broadly at Atlantic Canadian agriculture, but with some of these numbers. So we're familiar with a kind of more recent change where we've lost a lot of agricultural land. So we've heard of this news in the last 20 years, we've lost about 20%. And unfortunately, the census really can, and there's another reason why it's great to work with air photos. Bill Glenn and I did a paper on this, how air photos give us information that censuses don't. But the censuses have now changed from this rectilinear township-based boundary that we're used to on PEI to a more to a more stylized one. But you'll just watch here the amount of dark brown areas that on PEI have actually declined. So dark brown here is an area where over 60% of the total land mass is in agriculture, in crops specifically, excluding Christmas trees. But so all of the sort of the eastern, where we are here, right, from Bedeck to the Potato Belt and all up into Kensington and north is really dark area. So over 60% of the land until 2016 was agricultural. And that's actually dropping. It's dropping in the Albany area, and it's also really dropping in kind of East Queens. So that's a pretty significant shift, but it's nothing like the changes that we saw before. So if we look at the 3 different counties on PEI from the period of early British settlement from 1827 here, my first year, 1827, up until 26, actually that goes, sorry, I should change that. That is up to 2020 now, 2021. But the period of settlement, you have the growth of population. All 3 counties are seeing all kinds of agricultural expansion. Farmers creating farms, doing the hard work of clearing land, and with those lands and farms goes, the villages needed to support them, of course. So villages grow in PEI, farms grow in PEI, and then it levels out because, well, for a number of reasons. One of them is that agricultural land had reached its extent. This was a period where agriculture got bigger by getting kind of broader or larger, expanding into more areas. We call it extensive agriculture. It didn't have a lot of mechanical innovations, some, but not a lot. It didn't have a lot of biochemical innovations the way we know in the 20th century. So at this point, you just had to get more land if you wanted more food. And if you wanted more food and more work for your family, you just expanded. And so that period of growth and expansion was in the settlement era. It leveled off, which is very normal, and then it declined. And that's partly because in some areas we could have been overextended, but in others it was the support system really wasn't there for other people who wanted to work off the farm. So this is the period of kind of going down the road, leaving PEI, out-migration from PEI. But then it also levels out in the post-war period, so war ends here, 1946, kind of a sharp drop, especially in Kings County here, but these are already beginning to level out. And then a bit of stability in agriculture. So if we look at some other regions across the Maritimes, it looks very similar. So here, I only have the 4 Atlantic provinces going back to 1921, but in 1921 you can kind of see that early part where there was leveling and then decline. That's happening everywhere in the Maritimes. PEI is the orange line, so it's kind of, there's that leveling and there's the decline. The rest of the Maritimes was declining even more rapidly. And that's partly because Nova Scotia and New Brunswick have even less excellent farmland. So they kind of got out of agriculture a little bit more quickly. So there's, oh sorry, this is number of farms, not total crops. I believe this one is crops. No. This is total, sorry, that was number of farms, which very similar, PEI tracks right along with the amount of land in farms. But it's not completely 1-to-1 ratio. So with the number of farms dropping and we're kind of having that leveling out in the post-war period, we have the size of farms increasing. So the average, really typically, you kind of pull open the Meacham's Atlas or the Cummins Atlas, virtually every farm, like 100 acres, 150, don't have a lot of farms that are much bigger than that. More recently, we do. Of course, this is part of agricultural shifts in the last 20, 30 years. in that period of farms declining, we have a little bit more leveling. This is kind of a focus in the 1970s period. A little bit more kind of leveling in the amount of farms declining. So it's stabilized, but we are now in PEI for the first time, well actually, yeah, for the first time, well, we've dropped below 2,000 as of the turn of the century, but in the last census we're now less than 1,900 farmers on PEI. Very, very small number compared to our height when we had about 12,000. So, as I mentioned before, these air photos give us a powerful way to kind of look at the land. But this one is, I don't think, Bill, this is the Valenka Pathfinder that flew across PEI, but it's very similar to the one that flew across in 1935 and got our entire kind of set of air photos. And the aircraft operated mostly from Shediac. It's just easier, and we didn't quite have the fields to handle it. So this allows us to look at agriculture from above and to look at the changes in the land. So one of the ways to do that then is to kind of scale back and put those historical photos up. So this is a view of Eastern Kings in PEI in this is 1935. So this is actually Eastern Kings PEI, where Basin Head Beach is now. You can see that the basin hasn't been dug. So at this point, there is no channel, and it doesn't kind of go to the water. The original kind of outflow, or no one knows the original, but before that, before the 1938, I think, construction that was done, it actually flowed out of the east end of Basin Head. And the west end is just a sandy beach. This is an example, though, I wanted to show you of how agriculture looks from the air in 1935. And it's really like that patchwork quilt of fields, small fields, and multiple different types of crops kind of side by side. And we can then take that same air photo and show in 1935, fast forward in 1968, and there is a change in the fields. It's not super dramatic, but there is a lot of that patchwork field has even gone by this point, and there's larger fields there in the Little Harbor and the Little Harbor area just east of Surrey. This is something to point out too. I'm going to go back to 1935. You can see a little village here, or a little kind of crossroads, more of a community. This is a Greenvale in just northeast of Surrey, where letter A is. By 1968, there was really only a couple of houses left, and today there's none at all. So this is there's an example of a community that's completely disappeared. You'll still see a sort of street sign or a community name for it, but a lot of those communities have declined and disappeared. But I did promise to talk about the rise, so we will come back to where some of these return and are growing again. But there's a lot to see in these photos, I know. But to go back to 1968. Again, just look at the changes in field pattern and layout. So a lot of sort of individual here, 1, 2, 3, 4 fields, and they've been actually switched right to left, but there's much larger areas, and that's all potato agriculture. And here, large potato fields and a rotation field. So we have the replacement of small, kind of very mixed, the kind of small farms, that 100-acre farm, divided up into maybe 12 or 15 small fields that are being kind of farmed with different crops across them year by year, being replaced in 2020 here by kind of large farms and a smaller number of them. So that's just one of the ways that the book kind of looks at these places and agricultural places. Another one, it would be like diving in. Actually, we're still in Surrey for whatever reason, but here's an example of how residential development occurred in some of these areas. So this is an example of ribbon development, which is very common in PEI. But this is Surrey West, so just across the bridge in Surrey West, and one of the McDonald's, the Lieutenant Governor eventually, I think, at point A. There's just one farm there, except there's been another house built up here in 1935. But one thing you can tell from looking at this photo is that the farms, in this case, run lengthways, east to west. They're parallel to the road. And one thing I've found is that in cases where that occurred, we're much more likely to get ribbon development because one farm, it's easier to subdivide into all those smaller farms. So here, not surprisingly, we have in this particular strip, one farm has been sold, the other farm had remained in farmland, but by 1968, there's quite a number of houses along one side of the road, and then by 2020, it's just an example of how we have a lot of cases of this in PEI of ribbon development. One a little closer to home here, well, Kelvin Grove, actually I'm going to skip over that in the interest of time. I want to get back to some of the kind of bigger changes in PEI's kind of village structure. So back to what's going on in the 1960s. So this is a period where we're seeing a shift from that extensive agriculture, and this is these fellows gathering hay in PEI. Around 1910, this is a postcard, and it could be one of the Lewiston and NOAA. If you've studied these postcards, you know they're highly suspect. Sometimes it's not even of PEI, but I think a few people have said this one is. Sort of like 2 large loads of hay with several men and 4 or 5 horses working it to bring it in. These people are bringing in one of the kind of that really valuable agricultural commodity of PEI, hay and fodder. So I like this kind of people standing across the top. I kind of think of them as the fodders of Confederation. But we see a big shift as the agriculture goes from extensive, where we just go into as much land as possible, small fields for the most part, because horses don't need as much room to turn around as larger tractors and machines do, to, in the 1950s, a more mechanized version of agriculture. Now, we're starting to see more of this technology. Now this, of course, hay rake isn't brand new technology in this period that could be hauled and powered by a horse, but is much more likely to have a power by tractor. But one of the key things to notice here is that simply the number of people from this photo, where there's 8 at least in this image plus horses, to this one where there's only 2, bringing in basically the same amount of hay. 2 people, or if you zoom in on the little fella driving the tractor, it might be more 1.5. Can't be more than 10 years old. So in this period, it's a period also known for policy changes, and some of you will be familiar with the Comprehensive Development Plan that was launched in the 1960s. There's Alex B. Campbell, of course, the premier in 1969 when the plan was launched. But we can sometimes give a little too much credit to Campbell in this period, because it was actually his predecessor, Walter Shaw, who had started the research by commissioning a large kind of group of consultants called Acres International. Acres did a large multi-volume study of PEI. But when it became the 15-year federal-provincial arrangement, it really was under Alex Campbell. And so I'll just mention a few things about it. You know, it was a context, it was an era when small places that were considered underdeveloped or backwards in some more derogatory terms were kind of first prime candidates for modernization, for rapid modernization. So regional development funding was going on all over Canada, but especially in the Atlantic region, the have-not region. And so this is targeting specific regions for economic programs that could develop their economies. And so the Comprehensive Development Plan was a great example of that, and I borrowed this slide from Ed McDonald, which, by the way, really tough shoes to fill. Thanks for putting me right after Dr. Ed. But these slides are from him. You know, so the government's budget is 70.5 million. A lot of that's coming from Ottawa. It's never enough. The provincial debt is growing and growing and growing as an expenditure. By 1967, 99 million with lots of problems. So they're launching this in a period where the island is kind of running behind, but then they bring in this expert from outside. I don't know, any of you ever had the pleasure of meeting this guy, Dale Gallagher, and he gets lots of salty language to describe his co-workers in government. But he was known as a guy who got things done. And if you ever get a chance, if you haven't watched it before, there's a great National Film Board video on the Comprehensive Development Plan called 10 Days in September. And you can see it for free on archive.org. And so he was a chain-smoking workaholic, right, who's really kind of came in here. And not surprisingly, after the plan was launched and signed, 7 March, they were like, well, let's roll this out across the island. But what's one of the big things that they wanted to do with the plan? Well, they didn't really like those small patchwork fields and those small farms. So one thing that the plan decided to do or tried to do was bring in land consolidation policies, hedgerow removal policies, or hedgerow programs. And this was a map that, that Dell and team sent out, and it's actually featured in that film. And I won't get into it any more than this, but sent it out to these villages all across PEI, and it opens with an unknown village, but I think it's actually probably up west. I think it's O'Leary area, just from what I can see. But these kind of like madmen in their suits and ties from Ottawa, the civil servants, right, coming in, and they're sort of surrounding this small group of farmers and fishers in, I think it's western PEI. But then they show maps like this, and they say, see, look, you've got all this land, and you're really kind of not farming it in a very smart way. You've got small farms here and small farms there, and you're renting this one and you own that one, and you're driving back and forth, you're passing each other on the road. You should really consolidate those properties. So Dale Gallagher, with that kind of approach, did manage to get some things done, but you won't be surprised to know that it really wasn't very popular at PEI, telling islanders what to do with their land, and to do it kind of like without even hiding the fact that you're from Ottawa, right? It was really kind of a central Canadian program, and so I look at this just briefly in the book. I look at things like hedgerows too. This is a project that I was doing with students actually when COVID hit. We were using the historical air photos to look at 14 different townships in PEI, and to look at the hedgerows by simply getting my students using GIS to map and to show the location of every hedgerow. We could then compare those hedgerows over time and just see how they grew or declined. And I was actually a little bit surprised. I was a bit surprised actually that the hedgerows weren't all torn up, and well, again, Islanders didn't quite jump on that. But it wasn't all Ottawa. We've got Pickard Machinery here advertising bulldozers, a relatively new technology, and bulldozers get on your land and kind of dredge out your wetlands, dredge out your hedgerows, fill in the wetlands. You know, this something couldn't be reached a few years ago, but today it's grade A farmland with the Caterpillar, and that only costs you $50 an acre. Gullies, trees, brush, swamps, cut them out and expand that into new fields. So what I found in the book is that actually those lands didn't get kind of completely grubbed out, but hedgerows, if you can kind of go back to this picture of East Kings in 2020, a lot of hedgerows were dividing property and they remained. You can see in this one that some were removed here and here, but because they played such an important role in dividing properties, I think hedgerows kind of ended up remaining, staying quite popular on PEI. So the total area of hedgerows actually went up in this period. Here's an example as well. Oh, that was my Celtic growth example of kind of more urban development where two farms running parallel to a road very quickly turn into, or more easily turn into smaller houses instead of farms. Smaller housing lots. Okay. Back to villages, I really want to kind of show some examples here of PEI's villages. If we take all of the houses on PEI, and we can find those in the air photos and in National Topographic Series maps, and if we take all those houses and just map them, this map does not have any communities or it does not have any infrastructure, but you can pretty well tell where the roads are, right? These are just the houses of PEI. And in the 1930s, they were spread relatively evenly across rural PEI. There are some hotspots, central PEI for sure, the Montague area down to Murray River, and West Prince. Those were kind of more dense than others, and that's what this density map is showing. In rural PEI, as our population grew, we then kind of focused a little bit more, and I leave the red density, that's a tool in GIS to show where density is, because just comparing the green dots is really hard to tell, right, between 35 and 67, where settlement is becoming more dense. But it stays in West Prince, and here in the East Prince area, rural population remains quite dense, and it really starts to grow around the Charlottetown area. And leaving the inner kind of Sherwood, Parkdale, Charlottetown, Brighton out, it's not being included in the density equation. That's actually more recently, 2011, the effect of housing in that area. It's really kind of drawing in. And so this is an era where we have that decline in the sort of rural village area. But this isn't definitely not the end of village culture in PEI. And I wanted to kind of go and show what it looked like in 1967 with a new census that I found that I've never quite seen before. One of the issues with trying to figure out village population is that it's really hard to tell where a village ends, right? Where it starts and where it ends. And so there was this wonderful census done in 1971 called the Census of Unincorporated Areas. And what it did was it went up and down the roads just like normal. It was a normal census enumeration. But instead of asking, okay, you live inside lot, where are we here? Lot 28 or 27? 25. Are we 25 here? Okay. So lot 25, so right here, right?
26, okay.
Oh, 26, okay. Yeah, they'll stack all the way down to 28 at the bridge. So so they go up and down lot 25, and they know that you're in lot 25, but then they ask you, where do you live? Like, where is your home? What settlement are you from? And in Ontario and Quebec, where the census was, of course, designed, it kind of worked out pretty well because people who were rural, and people who were village-based were village-based. But when they got to the Maritimes, the enumerators made this note that they're like, so in Ontario and Quebec, they would put an asterisk beside it when they couldn't quite figure out, like, I don't know if this person's really in the village to say there. So when they got to the Maritimes, we just left it out because everybody's from a village. And this is the result. 1971, these are the villages that people said that they were from on PEI. They're everywhere, right? There's 400 of these villages from tip to tip across the island. And I was really struck by this, and it's kind of it described how, in the Maritimes at least, we have this kind of sense that you're from a community, even when, in some cases, you're not. Like you just clearly live farther away, you're outside of the community, or in some cases where that community is kind of gone, or it's much smaller now. And in Greenvale and near Surrey was one of the examples of that. I then did some. So these are the village people right here. This is PEI in 1971 at the end of extensive agriculture, shifting toward intensive agriculture. And these villages were home. So what made up a village? And I'm going to do something weird here and shift to a collection from 1947. And I hope this will work. If I put these over here and then do this, is going to play, I don't know, he's showing it on my screen, not on yours. I think I have one workaround here. One workaround. This pops up here, and I drag it over there. And then close it and select them all. Hopefully this works. Yeah, okay. This is going to cycle through. There's about 14 villages here that, famous to me, a pilot named Elton Woodside recorded. And you're going to have to try to figure out with me which one's there. I didn't know which one's there. I've looked at them long enough. But in 1947, he was known as the Flying Farmer. He went all across PEI. He was the one delivering the Guardian by air mail. And sadly, I do not have one in Bedak. I don't know that he ever took one. He might have, but it doesn't survive. But these are all kind of like the villages of PEI. And I'll go ahead and pause. Find my mouse. All right, that one should be easy. Anyone know where that is? Borden, exactly. So then you've got your trains queuing up here to go over to the ferry dock on the right. This one is in the book, and I talk about this a little bit. But any clue? It's also got a rail station running through it. Emerald, yes, very good. Emerald Junction. So the Y is just up here off of the photo. But there, yeah, that's the, I think, County Line Road that goes through the village. And it's just stunning. I just love this photo. I think I can even zoom into, with this a little bit. You can kind of see people standing on the road. But you really see like kind of your village infrastructure is still there. I don't know exactly which one are the stores and the kind of leftover old blacksmith shop, but you've got, some of them are more obvious, like you can see this is a fox farm down below, right? So a lot of fox farms in PEI are just around the edges of the villages and sometimes in the edges of the cities, like Sherwood. Sherwood is basically one big fox farm in the 1930s and 40s. But these images are just wonderful for showing what our villages looked like. In some cases, they haven't changed all that much, so that's one of the things I get to do in the book, is kind of look at places to change. This one, beautiful bridge, beautiful river, no. Montague, the beautiful. And yeah, it's very small, right, in 1947. Very, very small. This one, very hard to get. It's on Route 2, not too far from here. Totally different now.
Fredericton?
It is Fredericton, very good. Yeah, yeah, so there's Route 2 going by, and there was this one farm here that had a beautiful sort of set of hedgerows blocking it out. Much, much smaller. There's one that went from an orange dot on the map to almost nothing. This is the one that was on the cover slide, Bredalbin. This is actually the Dunk River dammed at that point, so there's a bit of a pond there, and some of the fields just to the east of it, and yeah, there's the main road, Bredalbin. Now I'm turned around. Where is this? I'm pretty sure. I can't remember which one that is. It'll come to me in a second. This one's easy. It's Kensington. And one thing I love about this is you've got our regional bus transit system going down Margate Road there, I think. Actually, that's the road to Indian River and Malpac. Yeah, no, did you say no trees?
No trees.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? So, yeah, one of the kind of striking things about the forest, and Bill Glenn did some amazing work on this, was, and during his career, was just the history of the forest, and Doug Sobey, of course, on this too, but in the recent period, it expanded, it grew, partly because this was really what I discovered, is that the hedgerows went from kind of this. You do have many small fields, right? These all look like the patchwork quilt from the air, and when they're blooming at different times and they've got different crops in them, they do look like a patchwork quilt, but we have more hedgerows now than we did at this point, partly because these have all grown in. Most of these long fields, long hedgerows, I mean, grew in. This is Muscush. Yeah, there's the church. He spent a lot of time up west. I believe this is O'Leary. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Yeah, right. And this is Alberton. Yeah. Lots of racetracks. And I think the last one is Tignish. Yeah, there's the big church and the cemetery in Tignish. And the terminus of the railway. The railway stops here, trains on the track, and the Y for the trains to turn around. I think that's all I had. But I just love these views of how, oh, there's another one. Any guesses?
There's the lighthouse. That's Petra? No.
Close?
New London Light.
No, it's our squarest little town in PEI.
Victoria.
Victoria by the Sea, yeah, there's our four blocks. Just love it. Victoria had a massive, like a pretty large fox farm. There's the lighthouse, just behind the lighthouse, that was a fox farm in 1947. Yeah, and back to Borden. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of give a quick tour through Elton Woodside's period of work. And then I'll kind of wrap up here. I see I'm at 1:45, so I will, yeah, I'll land the plane if I may. Actually, come to think of it, Bill Glenn, I do have your slides. Slides provided by, well, the source of PEI Forest Inventories. Bill Glenn, I think you made this particular image, or maybe I made it from it, but you made it first. Summerside, Charlottetown, Montague, showing the forest cover using these air photos. I really don't claim any originality here. Bill's idea. But to take this map and show from 1935 how our forest expanded, 1958, this was as a lot of that kind of poor land was being abandoned, jumping up to 2000, which is really kind of the peak. 2020, we've actually got a bit of a drop. Not a big change between 2020 and 2000, but big changes between 1935 and 2000. That's an example of where agriculture is being abandoned or kind of intensifying in certain areas, mechanization and different modernization programs. And one thing I wanted to point out, I guess, about the Comprehensive Development Plan is that, you know, despite a lot of people this one other slide, again from Ed McDonald. A little poke at Premier Campbell, though. Becoming an environmentalist. In the 1970s, when the plan became unpopular, actually, to his credit, Premier Campbell, he had just read a new book called Ernst Schumacher's book, Small is Beautiful. And he really embraced this idea that, islanders need an island solution for this. And so he was actually kind of really pushing environmentalists. I think, the ARC, the Institute of Managed Resources, backwoods hippie farms like the one I grew up on in Hazel Grove, all appeared in this time. And my wife likes to tease me and say, she's from Toronto, I have to admit, but my wife likes to tease me when I say something boorish or not quite educated. She says, "You were born in a barn?" And I said, no, it was an oyster shack. And it was one of the oyster shacks from the Comprehensive Development Plan that somehow my parents got their hands on, and that's how I spent the first, maybe a couple of weeks of life in as they built their first house. So the period of a definite change, and then to come back to our map, I did some more quick GIS work with this, just to look at, in the 1970s, which of these villages, which of these buildings, sorry, I'm getting toward the end, I gotta stop. I could go all night here, but when I start mixing up words like that, it's really time to stop. These villages were in many ways to support agriculture, but in some areas agriculture had already declined. So one of the things I'm doing now is just kind of doing a quick study of where agriculture's main earnings were. So already in the 1970s, you see this kind of big growth of the earnings of agriculture here in this area. This is a rich agricultural heartland. This shows up as a little bit lower, Central Queens, partly because they were very livestock based, and already they were getting more kind of cropping and seed potato production here in the east. And so I used a couple of factors to say which of these villages would be really considered agricultural support villages in the 1970s. And it's really impossible to say these areas weren't and these areas were, but this was clear. This was very much an agricultural belt, and also down here, agriculture was still booming in the 1970s, and so those areas were relying on those villages. They had relied on them traditionally for agriculture or to support agriculture. So what is Kensington, right? If not an agricultural support village? Summerside, in many ways, is a city. But it earned much of its way by supporting agriculture. And so the book, I talked a little bit about infrastructure already, but as infrastructure expands, as one of the images I love, I included it in the book, but up in the North Shore in Park Corner, a 1958 photo by an unnamed photographer, but Mike Goody supplied it to me, and I'm grateful. This is the road in Park Corner, which I just love the hooligans hanging out in the back of the, what year was it, Dad? 1953 Ford?
I think so.
It's a Mercury? Dad figured it was in the early 50s, but anyone that got the year on it? But when I went back, and this was with my mother and her nice camera, that's the same road, in pretty much the same location, because you can see the same house here. That's Ingleside, Senator Montgomery's home, and if you look back here, this barn becomes the Anne of Green Gables Museum. Hard to see it. The sign on it is not quite visible here. But one thing that really happens is that here in Park Corner, not only the roads widened and straightened, and paved every year, paved very frequently, but one of the big changes you see here is how many barns are visible in this image, right? I think there's actually 5, right? When you come forward to this one, there's really none, because I guess just one. That barn is of course the museum. There is a large dairy farm just over the hill at Cousins Pond. I think you can see silos or something on the horizon, but it's definitely a changed agricultural landscape, right? Where a smaller number of farms can do the same amount of work, and they really don't need the same kind of village structure as before. So PEI, and then just to show that same area from above, this is in 1968, just shortly after it had been straightened. This is a Campbell's Pond, the original Lake of Shining Waters. And there's the Anne of Green Gables Museum. The photographer would have been standing right about here. So it had already been straightened out by 1968. I couldn't go back in time to 68 and take a photo, I wish. just to see how these changes in the land look. But on PEI, this is from the recent and very interesting State of the Island report. You know, we are experiencing, like, this is part of larger transportation, what I call revolutions. And I'll show you the online website just as I close here. But like on PEI, I was kind of surprised to see that we have more roads per resident than anywhere else in Canada. And we like to complain about our roads a lot. But we actually have, if you look at it, it's remarkable. On PEI, by this measure, the highway kilometer below good, anything below good gets a very poor rating here. And PEI is near the top. We actually have some of the best roads, considering we have so many roads. If you go to Nova Scotia, some of you won't be shocked to know they have a lot of poor or very fair or poor roads in Nova Scotia for those large areas. So this is, as this revolution occurred here in the 1960s, it was about bringing pavement and getting people in and out of larger cities and modernizing the resources we have. But with that, suddenly you don't need to shop in your local village anymore, right? You can kind of get on that highway, you can get to town. And it's a double-edged sword, though. It's because it actually enhances our urban development situation. Whether it's a problem or not, we could debate. But you know, so as houses begin to appear on these roads, it becomes, well, it's feasible, right, to live along a road like that and to be able to get to and from town and to your place of work. School consolidation, of course, is another thing, where we can drive now. We can get our kids to school. And I really didn't get into coastal or urban developments. You can find that in the book, but just because we're so close to Summerside, I will show those images. So Summerside in 2020 in the book. There it is in 1935. Big shift, right? In 1935 to 2020. And here it is as it grows and expands, especially in the West End. And I like to kind of put this image up here. It's a flight over the suburbs by an RCAF pilot. And kind of see, this is like East End, Summerside, would have been this neighborhood right down here. So you can kind of see the dramatic expansion of our infrastructure, of our cities, with that, a decline in villages. But I do say that there is a possible rise in villages as well, and that's because we have some of our villages, and I think Bedeck is among them. We can debate like how healthy and how robust it is, but there's still a lot of areas of PEI that have retained a lot of population. And I don't know if you got the abstract, but I sent it out and suggested that a lot of younger families are now wanting to move to these small areas, partly because the cost of living and the cost of housing has really not, housing development has not kept up in our major cities since the Great Recession, 2008, 2009. And so a lot of millennials, sort of my younger siblings, I guess would be considered in that group, and then this new generation, Gen Z, is really looking at small towns and villages. And this is something I don't think could have predicted 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Partly it's because it was enhanced by COVID era, but remote work, the ability to teleconference, and people's just interest in living a slower pace of life, getting away from the kind of big urban areas and into more rural and in some ways more affordable parts of Canada. This creates opportunities, but it also creates challenges for us. We have like kind of all kinds of debates about this, whether it would be good or not, because in many ways cities are a very sustainable way to expand and have a kind of large population where people live close to their place of work. But suddenly, with more remote and more online access to work, it doesn't being that close to work is now kind of negotiable, where before it really wasn't. You needed to be in a city and you needed to have access, especially to amenities like transit. And one of the things the book does, and I won't kind of unpack this is one image in the book, but it looks at the Charlottetown area, and I just divided them up, and I looked at the built infrastructure around the Charlottetown area, and do I have the table? I do, it's just a lot of numbers. But really, it's kind of like looking at how, from the 1880s with the Meacham's Atlas until the 21st century, where most of the sort of Charlottetown 20 kilometer 20 kilometer buffer around Charlottetown, which actually includes Bonshaw, way out there. But it didn't include here because the bridge hadn't been built. The causeway, even though it shows on this map, hadn't been built until the 1950s. So in those early years, it was definitely more than 20 kilometers to get to South Shore. But as bridges and infrastructure get built up here, we really see the rise of particularly the western part, which rises to 29%. The proportion of all the housing in that rural zone is like 30%. So these areas, the bedroom communities, as it were, of the cities, are growing and changing kind of rapidly. One of the things that the book just tries to do again is kind of look at the role that rural communities infrastructure plays as we see changing education systems, changing economies, rural housing, urban housing, and the like. So that brings me just to kind of like this website that I've got in the background here, and this, if you go to upei.ca/timeflies, all one word, time flies. upei.ca/timeflies brings you to this one. The URL then looks different, but it's just redirecting you. What it shows here is just this kind of homepage for the book. You can see the online edition book here, which uses something called a story map. But just down below that, there's sort of two options. You can also go into the UPEI web viewer. This is the one where I promised you could kind of do this whole process that I've been doing here on your own. And so this is GeoPEI. You'll have to just clear the OK button. And the best way to do it is to sort of start in your home, kind of find your part of PEI. Let's go right to Bedek, why not? And we'll do a little tour of Central Bedek in GeoPEI. We are in the corner, and some of the layers just don't work at certain scales. So actually, we can go way back to Doug Sobey's expertise, well, one of his many, and look at the Holland survey, right? So we can see where the Holland map was, and always interesting, of course, is the location of Acadian homes, right? The red squares were noted, as well as some mills and other structures. So you can turn those layers on and off. You can actually make them slightly transparent too if you want, but I think for now I'll just turn them on and off. In the 1840s, Henry Bayfield came by and enhanced the navigational maps. For that one you have to zoom out because it's really at this scale. But he also did a few of the bays and rivers, and so if you look at the bays level, it does go, I forgot Bayfield's map, it does go right to Callback Street. So you can kind of see in this one, I don't know if Bayfield noted every house. He probably noted ones that were very clearly visible from the water, because even more than Samuel Holland, Bayfield was a nautical, he was mapping the coast, wanted to make it safer for people to sail on the coast. So what you see over here is like a modern road layer kind of going over top of it. So there was no Montgomery Road when Bayfield came by, for instance. And you can turn those off by this little set of squares up here is a base map button. Oops, I forgot to hit the space bar. If you turn that base map off, it'll change it from this one. The default is like an imagery hybrid. So it has some imagery, the aerial photos, but it also has some roads and some structures and some labels. And if you just turn it to imagery, it gets rid of the labels, and that can be kind of more enjoyable if you're looking at, say, like, so now Bayfield doesn't show Montgomery Road. If you put it on the hybrid, it will. So if you put it on imagery or any other layer, really, it won't. And you can turn it off, and you don't have those kind of cluttering your view. So you can come in here and kind of explore the Bayfield's view of Bedek Bay, and again, turn it on and off and see what's there today. A nice big farm had already been cleared here on the point, and where there's a big round field. Yeah, I'm always intrigued by it. I just love this area. So we'll keep going forward in time. We're time traveling together here. We'll go to the 1880 Meacham's Atlas. We turn this on. It puts it right over top. And again, you can kind of compare then and now, and you can compare one map to another. So let's compare the 1928 Cummins Atlas. So it's just a great way to do research. I built it essentially to help me write the book, and a lot well, there's been thousands of islanders using it, and I would invite you to use it. So upei.ca/timeflies, and then scroll down to the bottom and click on this. Our air photos are on here. It's just lovely to have these accessible now. I won't ask Bill Glenn to tell you what he had to do to get that same overlay issue back in what, the 1980s you started on it? 90s? Yeah, I won't, he's happily retired and not, he's getting PTSD looking at this, I think. Yeah, all of the air photos that we have on here. This property map some of them are slow to load if you see a little button flashing. This is a map of the properties that the Comprehensive Development Plan mapped, and they really tried to map every single one of them. So this can kind of show you, if you're looking at your land, when they created the first map of the property lines, this was for those madmen getting together making the maps. They created this, and I scanned it and put it online for us, and right up to the present, the 2020 air photos are on there as well. So that's GeoPEI, lots of fun. It's got measurement tools, don't use them for navigation or anything else, or I promise you will get lost. And don't use them for legal matters. That's all part of the disclaimer at the beginning. So that's GeoPEI, and I'd love to, if someone wants me to go to a neighborhood or a house, I'd love to. It's just so fun to do it live. But I also want to show you the Time Flies Online. This is the one that Bailey Clark and I wrote together. And what this one does is it takes you through 10 additional sites. These are not in the book. This is the exhibition up top. And as you scroll down, it kind of just a little introduction to flight and to air photos on PEI, a little bit about the full book. And then this map here shows you can expand any of these maps with the expand button. So this map shows the original sites that were in black, and then the new sites. I was going to show Crapo here because it's kind of a cool example. Each one of them has a sort of theme associated with it. Yeah, so each one of them kind of looks at a theme. So I look at dairy farming, no surprise, in Crapo. But some of them are like the railroad, its impact on places like North Wiltshire, or Freeland and Malpeque Bay, and it's the growth of the shellfish sector. So if I scroll down, we're going to see there's our plane again. Sister Margaret Marie, who described her first flight over the island in 1955. I just thought that was fun. It's just lots of images like this. So this is coming into Cornwall from the west. Meadowbank Road is here, Upper Meadowbank Road, and sort of kind of coming into Cornwall. Lots of great views like this, peppered throughout the book. And then when you can kind of navigate to any one of them. But as you go over it, I just want to point out one thing. We have this little graphic here that really shows these underlined years. You have to click on that because a story map is meant to work with stories and maps together, surprisingly. Story and map, but the map is interactive. So you can kind of go on and kind of zoom around that map. Unfortunately, there was no option to kind of just add all of the layers. For that, you really need to go to GeoPEI. But to read the story the way we designed it to be read, you click on these underlined images. So this will take you to the place we're talking about in 1968, okay? So it's kind of a guided story. And we're off. Choose your first site by scrolling down. And we go through a heritage site, Rocky Point. Yeah, so and as you scroll, it kind of zooms in specifically. But don't forget, when you see the sort of underlined button, there's a reminder, I guess, of it. Click on it, and it shows Holland's map of his headquarters there, and sites Duxovy, of course. and as you go down, just looking for another year. This is the fort in the 1930s. I can't remember the year, but had been sort of abandoned. But the farm, it wasn't the Warren farm, it was the neighbor. They did a nice job of protecting and kind of fencing it off. So I don't think there was actually that much livestock in it. The livestock were all around it. But it kind of retained a lot of its features. So there you click on it in 1935. It's a bit fuzzy, but you'll see the kind of features we want you to look at, 1968 and so on. So there you go. That is Time Flies. That is my take on villages in PEI, and that is a few of the tools I've been developing at the university and Applied Communication Leadership Culture Program. If you know of any undergrads who want to kind of get involved in kind of mapping or any kind of advanced communication tools while they do a Bachelor of Arts, tell them to check out our courses in our program. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Josh, for that. Very interesting presentation of a century from the 11th century onwards. Any questions from the room?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, does the island use, is LiDAR available for PEI?
It is. Yep, it is. Yeah. I haven't used it myself. I've used the products that they make from it, like the digital elevation models to get terrain and that. But I haven't actually used the point clouds from LiDAR yet myself, but others in the room might be able to fill in the gaps there. But it is, we have it for many places on PEI. When you ask if it's available, I haven't actually kind of downloaded the point files myself yet. But I think it's mainly just a matter of asking. The university is also producing quite a few kind of more case study for coastal erosion and various studies. LiDAR stands for Light Image Detection and Radar.
In ranging?
Yeah, it's a way of, it's another type of remote sensing, more advanced than air photos, but you can literally fly over this and find historic sites even in forests. Not as many PEI, but there's all kinds of studies waiting.
I use it a lot at home, looking for house sites and foundations,
Yeah.
and farm boundaries and whatever, you know.
Yeah. Looks right through the trees at the soil. Yes.
Well, the number of farms has changed. Has the amount of land being farmed changed, you know?
Recently?
Well, over time?
Yes, it's much lower. So we were called the Million Acre Farm. And that was like those three lines, like when it was near the top, if you added all three of those up, you'd get to close to 1 million acres. But that would be, that would be including the forest on farms. So essentially, the island's what, 800,000 hectares, 1.4 million acres, I think. So about 1 million of those were in farms. Some of those lands in farms were actually, were still forested. So that was our peak, right? That was the absolute peak of agricultural extension into lots of areas that probably shouldn't have been farmed, too boggy, too poorly drained, and so on, or rocky. We don't have any mountains, but we do have some pretty high rocky lands too. The Culloden Hills in Southeast Kings, you'll see the maps, the green map that the idea I got from Bill there was those are areas where you really see the forest growing back and land being abandoned. So yes, the total amount did decline, but then it leveled and stabilized in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and the kind of bigger shock that we're all wrestling with is like there's another decline happening, and that's concerning because if it continues for a long time, so someone said 20% of land in crops has declined, has disappeared, which is a pretty big drop in the last 2 to 3 decades. If that was to continue, it'd be pretty hard to get that back, right? It's not impossible to get farmland back because it's land, it washes away completely by erosion. It's still land, but if it gets taken up by other uses and kind of locked in as residential land or golf courses or whatever, nothing wrong with golf courses, but they don't grow very tasty food. It's a good question, though. It is dropping, yeah. And yes, sir.
So the first aerial photos we can see is from 1935?
Yep, of PEI. There are older ones from other places. The oldest one that I could find, and maybe people will correct me on this, is actually 1921. but it was just a flight that took off from Charlottetown. It actually flew to Summerside, and oh, I should have showed it. It's got a great image of Holman Island. Yeah, in 1921. And it's one of those oblique photos, just like the 1947 village images that I showed. It's sort of a little small plane taking images at the side. I don't know of any air photos older than that on PEI, so I think that was like flight 001, 1921. There's one image in the book of Victoria, I believe, in 1921. Good question. Yeah, the first like comprehensive survey is 1935. Oops. I went to sleep on this. Anybody else?
Yeah, do you know what your next focus of research might be?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. I'm working on what I call farm profiles now, and the goal of that is to try and it's actually for all of Eastern Canada. And if you bear with me, I will show you the. So this is my website at UPEI. Underneath projects, since you asked, Farm Energy Profiles is one that will compare farms all across, oops, I need to show the index map. So these are all profiles. I only have one PEI farm, it's the Robinson Farm, not too far away, in Guston Cove. But one of my goals eventually, come on, oh wow, that's really big, is to kind of do representative farms across Eastern Canada, all the way from Ontario to the Maritimes. And the idea, I've got the Anderson sisters on there because, as you know, I actually haven't done that one yet, but I would love to. Any relatives of the Anderson sisters here in Fernwood or Seacow Head?
Oh, yes,
There are three girls who kept a diary.
well, the McFadyens, they Anderson in the 1870s.
Mhm.
That McFarlane's would descend from
Yeah.
sisters, and Karen's in Freetown.
Yeah, Winifred Wake shared the diary with me. I think she
Yeah.
transcribed it, but these three daughters kept it. And the reason why I say that, and there's a farm name attached to each one of them, is because the census can give us a lot of great data on farms. And starting in the 1870s, the reason I had 1861 is because sadly PEI's census manuscripts don't exist from 1871, the ones that kept farm information. So all we have is the names for PEI. So for farm information, I went back a decade to 1861. But this allows us to kind of do comparisons. And when I have a name there, it's because I have some other source that can allow us to compare. So something like the Anderson sisters writing about their farm year after year, they kind of took turns trading off. Provides that really rich source to be able to compare. Another Anderson here is in the Tantramar Marshes, and he kept this lovely diary of the 1870s. Talk about a fodder of Confederation. That guy grew a lot of hay and exported it from the marsh. It was the whole kind of marsh area here, and PEI caught up to, eventually became a big hay producer as well. But the Tantramar, like the Sackville area, was just exporting massive amounts, because when the railway came in and they had that rich marshland, they could produce huge amounts of hay and ship it by rail. So he's one of those examples. But yeah, that's my story. My project now is to do this kind of like regional or pan-Canadian study of how farms changed. And the reason I want to do, I call it a farm profile, is because even though the families pass on and move away and sometimes become new families, the land itself could be thought of as a system. So I want to look at how land has been treated, potentially, and I look at Doug here, even going back to the Acadian period of looking at how farms were managed and how the land was managed and those resources produced food in the 18th century on PEI, and then compare that. That's like a really awesome 300-400 year history. That's something the only Europeans have done. They like look at that long run history of change over time. Something I'd like to do with farms in Eastern Canada. Yes?
Will you, in the process of the study, will you be looking at the role of farms in national food security programs?
Oh, that's a great question. I would love to know more about that, but just thinking on my feet here about how I'd work that into the study. I mean, the question of national food security
Yeah.
is really interesting to me. That is very recent, the program itself.
Well, for some of us.
Yeah, well, exactly, but the federal program, the food security, is like, what, it's a Trudeau initiative that kind of launched it, and I don't actually know what's happening to that. I would love to chat with you more. But yeah, the idea of farms being able to provide enough food is actually exactly what I am interested in. I call them farm energy profiles because they are studies of how farms went from being, in some cases, our most important energy producer and our only energy producer. And in many parts of the world, farms are now an energy sink. It actually takes more energy to produce food than we get from it. Now, we get enormous amounts of wonderful food, but if you start looking at the numbers, it's like, well, every kind of implement, every tractor, every bag of fertilizer, that actually takes energy that's being produced elsewhere. So to kind of take it all together, at one point, farms were sustainable where they used animals and land together, and good old, I mean, nothing fancy about it, but manuring the soil was very valuable. And it didn't require inputs from the mainland or anywhere else. They were kind of self-sufficient in some ways. And so that's exactly what I want to look at, is how farms kind of change technologies, but change their ability to produce food for our society. Chat later.
I have a question about the present. The population of the island is growing at a terrific rate, about 40,000 people in a period of 5 years, possibly. And this must represent an era of very big change in the landscape. I mean, it's actually going on at the moment with the building of housing and such. Is there anyone looking at this, contemporary changes, or that will come later? Is it?
I didn't show this actually, but I'm glad you brought it up. The population of PEI tracks right along with settlement in the period when basically everybody was a farmer or fisher. And then as we have, this would have been a better map to show, but these are those same three counties, right? Kings is the bottom, Prince and Queens. The population does dip, and this is the going down the road period. It's the only province in Canada to have 4 consecutive population declines. In fact, it might be the only province in Canada that had 2 consecutive population declines. So for 4 decades in a row, we had population decline. And that's because it's debated. It's wildly debated why that happens. I love the larger question about, well, why didn't Nova Scotia? Well, they had Halifax, right? People could go to Halifax and all kinds of industrial jobs. And there were a few cities, Cape Breton and the coal mines. There was lots of other opportunities. PEI didn't have any mines. It didn't have a lot of factories. And so people, when the farms couldn't handle more kind of population, people went onto other cities, and those cities were outside the province. We returned to population growth here in the 1920s, 30s, 40s. But this is what everyone's talking about, right? In the last 5 years, that growth is 8%, and it is unprecedented. Of course, and since the time of settlement, it is that kind of rate of growth at the top right there is remarkable. Your question was, what do we do with it?
Is anyone, I suppose it's currently changing, but is anyone looking at current changes, students or such? Changes, or the data perhaps is not available yet in terms of, it's every 10 years the aerial photography, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, we're making hay with the 2020 aerial photos, but it feels like a long way off. We'll have the next one. And it'd be great if they could come out for 5 years or more, but we work with what we have. Excuse me. But yeah, there's going to be all kinds of interesting discoveries there with when we get the next round of air photos, what's happening to the forest. Obviously, the state of the forest is really important. What's happening to the coastline. You don't need air photos for kind of built infrastructure, but I find that it's helpful. What's happening to agricultural land? All of these things are. It's a great check to have the air photos to check things like census data, volunteer reported data. So yeah, there's a lot going on, but yeah, this really highlights that kind of drop, especially in Queens County is now for the first time smaller than Prince County in terms of amount of agricultural land. Yeah, which is part of one of those troubling trends. The housing, did you ask about housing, or am I just going, there? I mean,
Yeah.
it was probably 3 years ago, it seemed unthinkable for most young people to be able to afford anything in Halifax or in some cases Charlottetown. But there is signs that in the Maritimes, this rate of growth, parts of Nova Scotia experience that as well, that has slowed down a lot. There's been changes in immigration policy, but it's not slowing down a lot. Well, it's slowing down somewhat, but certainly not the way it was in the earlier periods. That is possibly slowing down housing prices. Housing will be going up, but like we're really behind in housing, and it didn't catch up. It didn't catch up to population. So it's a great question. That's why I put that kind of title here. Is there a revival of village culture or of dwellings outside of large urban areas anyway? And we certainly have that happening in PEI, whether it's the best way to have new developments or not is definitely up for debate. But it's something, yeah, we're looking at it right now with these data, and I say we in kind of a broad sense because I do try to stay in my lane and just do history. But like I said in those earlier slides, I think these studies do help us understand the future, even if I'm not the one making the predictions.
Well, thank you, Josh, for that very interesting overview of the whole last 100 years, basically, the changing landscape. On behalf of the board, I want to present a little appreciation for your talk tonight, and
Thank you so much.
we thank you for coming along.
Around for a while and chat informally, or let people.
I'll make a few announcements.
Great. Yeah. Do you want this back?
Yeah.